A deaf millionaire lived 60 years without ever knowing the sensation of hearing music. Everything changes when, in a simple hotel, he finds a poor girl playing piano and feels the vibrations invading his body. This instant awakens in him emotions he believed impossible and shakes the certainties of an entire lifetime. The unlikely encounter reveals that, even in silence, music can transform destinies forever. William Hayes stood barefoot on the cool marble floor of the lobby, his expensive Italian leather shoes discarded beside a potted palm. The blister on his right heel had been bothering him all morning, and in the empty hotel lobby, he'd finally given in to the urge for relief. At 60, the silver-haired hotel magnate had built his empire on attention to detail, and right now that detail was the exquisite discomfort of broken skin against fine leather. The Charleston Grand was one of his smaller properties, a boutique hotel nestled in the historic district of the South Carolina coastal city. It wasn't the crown jewel of Hayes Hospitality International, but William had always maintained that every link in his chain deserved the same scrutiny. He ran his hand along the reception counter, feeling for dust that his eyes, sharp as they were behind titanium-framed glasses, might miss. William had been born profoundly deaf. He had never heard the crash of the Atlantic waves against the Charleston shoreline, never heard the bustle of tourists on Market Street, never heard a single note of music in his 60 years. His world was one of vibrations, visual cues, and the expressive language of hands that had become his primary mode of communication. It had not stopped him from building an international hotel empire that catered to the finer sensibilities of guests who took their hearing for granted. Sarah Miller, his personal assistant of 20 years, stood a respectful distance away, her tablet clutched against her chest. She had been with him long enough to recognize his moods, to interpret the subtle changes in his expression that others might miss. Right now, she could tell he was irritated, probably by the blister, possibly by the lackluster occupancy rates of this particular property. The Charleston Grand had potential, but it wasn't performing as well as their market analysts had projected. Sarah's fingers moved rapidly in American Sign Language. The quarterly reports are ready for your review, and Ms. Daniels from Operations wants to discuss the renovation schedule. William nodded, his own hands responding with the fluid grace of someone who had been signing since childhood. Later, I want to walk the property first. Something doesn't feel right here. It was then that he felt it, a subtle tremor through the marble beneath his bare feet. At first, he thought it might be the rumble of delivery trucks on the cobblestone street outside. But this was different. This was rhythmic, intentional. William frowned, his toes curling against the cool stone as if to better capture the sensation. He followed the vibrations, padding across the lobby toward the small alcove, where a grand piano sat largely ignored by guests more interested in their smartphones than in live music. As he rounded the corner, he saw her, a teenage girl with unruly dark curls cascading down her back, her fingers dancing across the keys of the instrument. William couldn't hear what she was playing, but he could feel it, a pattern of vibrations traveling through the floor and up into his body. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. He stood transfixed, watching her slender frame sway slightly as she played, completely unaware of his presence. Sarah caught up with him, her expression curious as she observed the usually stoic businessman's uncharacteristic stillness. The girl at the piano remained oblivious to her audience, lost in a world of sound that William had never accessed. "Who is she?" William signed, his movements sharp with unexpected emotion. Sarah shook, her head indicating she didn't know, but she approached the front desk clerk who was watching the scene with mild interest. After a brief exchange, Sarah returned to William's side. "Lisa Carter's daughter," she signed. "The mother works housekeeping. The girl waits here after school until her mother's shift ends at 6. Apparently, the manager allows her to play the piano as long as there aren't guests in the lobby requiring quiet." William's eyes narrowed as he studied the girl more carefully. She was perhaps 15, dressed in jeans and a faded blue sweatshirt that had seen better days. Her sneakers were worn at the edges but clean. Everything about her spoke of careful management of limited resources. Yet there was nothing limited about the way she commanded the instrument. Even to William's untrained eye, it was clear she played with skill beyond her years. And though he couldn't hear the music, the vibrations translated into a kind of physical poetry that resonated through the marble and into his bones. "Her name?" he signed. "Melody," Sarah replied, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth at the aptness of it. William felt the corner of his mouth twitch in response. Melody. A word that had always been abstract to him, a concept he understood intellectually but had never experienced. Until now, perhaps. He moved closer, careful to stay in her peripheral vision so as not to startle her. When she finally noticed him, her fingers faltered, and the vibrations William had been savoring abruptly ceased. The girl, Melody, looked up with wide brown eyes, immediately assessing the expensive cut of his suit, the authority in his stance. "I'm sorry," she said, her lips easy to read as she quickly stood. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." William shook his head and gestured for her to continue. When she looked confused, Sarah stepped forward and explained in a gentle voice that William could read from her lips. "This is Mr. Hayes. He owns the hotel. He's deaf, but he was enjoying the vibrations from your playing." Melody's eyes widened further. "The vibrations?" William nodded, pointing to his bare feet on the marble floor, then gesturing toward the piano. He signed a request to Sarah, who translated. "He's asking if you would continue playing. He says he's never experienced music like this before." Hesitantly, Melody sank back onto the piano bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before she began to play again, this time watching William with curiosity as he closed his eyes and focused on the sensations traveling through the floor. For William, it was a revelation. Different patterns of vibration corresponded to what he assumed were different notes or chords. Some felt light and rapid, others deeper and more resonant. He had always assumed music was lost to him, a pleasure exclusively for the hearing world. But standing there, absorbing the vibrations through his feet, he realized music wasn't just sound. It was physical, it was movement, it was something he could feel. When Melody finished playing, William opened his eyes to find her watching him intently. He smiled, and a rare expression on his usually serious face, and signed "thank you." The universal gesture needed no translation. That evening, as his driver took him back to his penthouse overlooking Charleston Harbor, William found himself distracted from the quarterly reports he'd intended to review. His thoughts kept returning to the girl at the piano and the strange new world she had inadvertently opened to him. For the first time in his 60 years, William Hayes wondered what else he might have missed in his assumption that music was beyond his reach. He made a decision. Tomorrow he would return to the Charleston Grand, without his shoes. Over the next 2 weeks, William's executive team noticed a shift in his schedule. The CEO, who once divided his time meticulously between his portfolio of luxury properties, now spent 3 afternoons a week at the Charleston Grand, his least profitable venture. Sarah fielded confused calls from the board members, deflecting questions with practiced diplomacy. "Mr. Hayes is personally overseeing operational improvements at our Charleston property," she would explain, her fingers simultaneously signing the conversations to William when he was present. But Sarah knew better. After 20 years as his right hand, she recognized the signs of William Hayes becoming fixated on something new. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, William sat in a corner of the hotel lobby, ostensibly reviewing property reports on his tablet. His Italian loafers were neatly placed beside his chair, his bare feet flat against the marble floor. His eyes, however, kept drifting to the alcove where Melody Carter had once again taken her place at the piano. Today she played something different. William could tell by the way the vibrations felt more measured, more deliberate. The rhythmic pulses traveled through the floor and into his feet, up through his ankles and into his legs. He closed his eyes briefly, concentrating on the sensation. It was still so new to him, this way of experiencing what others took for granted. Sarah approached with a cup of tea, placing it on the table beside him. Her hands moved in their familiar dance. "The manager is getting nervous. He thinks you're finding fault with his operation." William snorted softly. "Tell him to relax. I'm not here to criticize. Then why are you here? Sarah's signing was direct, almost challenging. It was the privilege of a 20-year working relationship. William didn't answer immediately. His eyes tracked back to Melody, who was lost in her playing, unaware of their discussion. I'm learning, he finally signed. Learning what? Something I should have learned a long time ago. Sarah followed his gaze to the teenager at the piano. Her expression softened with understanding. She's quite talented, self-taught. From what I've gathered, the front desk staff say she's been playing here for about a year. William nodded, absorbing this information. The piano needs tuning, he signed, feeling the slight dissonance in the vibrations without knowing the musical terminology to describe it. I'll arrange it, Sarah replied, making a note on her tablet. Later that afternoon, as Melody was packing up her worn backpack, William approached her. He had been practicing how to communicate with her, wanting to bridge the gap without Sarah's constant interpretation. He held out a notepad with a message written in precise handwriting. Your playing creates beautiful vibrations. Would you mind if I asked you some questions about music? Melody read the note, her expression a mix of surprise and uncertainty. She looked up at the imposing figure of William Hayes, the man who owned not just this hotel, but dozens across the country. She had heard the hotel staff whispering about his sudden interest in spending time in the lobby, how it made everyone on edge, wondering if jobs were at risk. I don't know much about music theory, she said slowly, making sure to face him directly, so he could read her lips. I just play by ear. William smiled at the idiom and wrote again, by feel is what interests me. I've never experienced music before. Melody's brow furrowed as she considered this. Never? Not even vibrations from speakers or concerts? William shook his head, writing, I avoided it. I thought it wasn't for me. There was something vulnerable in the admission that made Melody reconsider the stern businessman. She glanced at the clock behind the reception desk. Her mother wouldn't be finished with her shift for another hour. I could show you a few things, I guess, she offered hesitantly. William's face brightened in a way that transformed his usually severe features. He gestured toward the piano, inviting her to return to the bench. As she sat down, he pulled a chair close to the instrument, positioning it where he could place his hand on the wooden body of the grand piano. Melody began to play a simple melody, watching as William closed. His hand splayed on the piano surface. She gradually increased the volume, pressing the keys with more force, and saw his eyebrows raise as he felt the difference. Try this, she said, pausing to make sure he was watching her lips. Put your hand here, on the lid over the strings. William complied, and Melody began to play again, this time a low, rumbling progression that sent vibrations surging through the wood and into his palm. His eyes widened at the intensity of the sensation. For the next hour they experimented. Melody would play different notes, different rhythms, watching as William discovered the variations in vibration. She showed him how the pedals changed, the sustain, how chords created complex vibration patterns compared to single notes. When Lisa Carter emerged from the staff elevator at 6, still in her housekeeping uniform, she froze at the sight of her daughter sitting at the piano with William Hayes, the hotel owner's hand resting on the instrument while Melody played. Melody? Lisa's voice was cautious as she approached, her eyes darting nervously between her daughter and her employer. Melody looked up with an excitement Lisa rarely saw these days. Mom, Mr. Hayes can feel the music through the vibrations. We've been experimenting with different ways he can experience it. Lisa's expression remained wary as she nodded a respectful greeting to William. Mr. Hayes, I hope Melody wasn't disturbing you. William quickly wrote a note and held it up. Quite the opposite. Your daughter is very talented and patient with my questions. Lisa relaxed slightly but still seemed uncomfortable. We should get going, Melody. The bus leaves in 10 minutes. As Melody gathered her things, William wrote another note. This one he handed to Lisa. The piano will be tuned tomorrow. Please encourage your daughter to continue playing here. Lisa read the note, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind. That's very—" After they left, Sarah approached William, who was still sitting beside the piano, his fingers tracing the polished wood thoughtfully. "You're going to make them nervous if you keep singling them out," she signed. "The girl has extraordinary talent," William replied, "and she just gave me my first music lesson." Sarah's expression softened. "I've never seen you like this before." William considered this, then signed with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "I've spent 60 years believing certain experiences weren't meant for me. What else have I been wrong about, Sarah?" The question lingered between them, unanswered but profound in its implications. As they prepared to leave, William made a decision. "Contact James at the Charleston Symphony," he signed to Sarah. "I want to learn about how different instruments create vibrations." Sarah nodded, but her eyes held a question. "This is important," William added, answering her unspoken concern. "I don't know why yet, but it is." As his driver navigated the evening Charleston traffic, William gazed out at the historic city that had unexpectedly become the setting for a personal awakening. The world had always been silent for him, but he was beginning to understand it. Wasn't devoid of music. The vibrations he'd felt today had awakened something dormant inside him. Curiosity, yes, but also a sense of loss for what he'd never thought to seek out before. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Symphony? Director available tomorrow at 11. Bringing demonstration team to hotel. Confirmed piano tuner for 9 a.m. William smiled. Tomorrow would bring new vibrations, new sensations, new understanding. For the first time in years, William Hayes was looking forward to discovery. The Charleston Symphony's educational outreach. Team arrived at the Grand precisely at 11 the next morning, intrigued by the unusual request from William Hayes. 4 musicians unloaded their instruments in the lobby under the curious gazes of hotel staff. The newly tuned piano gleamed in the morning light, streaming through the tall windows, its brass manufacturer's plate polished to a high shine. William stood to the side, watching the proceedings with Sarah beside him, translating the musicians' conversations into sign language. James Davidson, the symphony's director, approached with an extended hand and a wide smile. "Mr. Hayes, it's an honor. I must admit your request was one of the most unique we've received, but also one of the most intriguing." As Sarah signed the director's words, William nodded and responded with his hands, which Sarah voiced for him. "Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice. I'm on a journey of discovery that started rather unexpectedly." Davidson gestured to his small team. "We've brought a cello, a violin, a flute, and of course we'll use your piano here. Each instrument creates vibrations in different ways. Our goal today is to help you experience those differences." For the next 2 hours, William immersed himself in a world he had never fully known existed. The cellist, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair, guided his hand to the body of her instrument as she played. The deep, resonant vibrations traveled through the wood and into his palm, up his arm, and somehow into his chest. It was an entirely different sensation from the piano, more intimate, more directly connected to his body. The violinist demonstrated how the smaller instrument created higher frequency vibrations that William could feel more acutely in his fingertips when touching the instrument's body. The flutist showed how wind instruments created vibrations through the movement of air, placing William's hand near the tone holes to feel the subtle disturbances. Throughout it all, William's face remained a study in concentration and wonder. By the end of the demonstration, he had compiled pages of notes and questions. The musicians, initially uncertain about the purpose of the exercise, had become enthusiastic teachers, moved by William's genuine curiosity and the novelty of explaining their art through tactile sensation rather than sound. "This has been enlightening," William signed as the session concluded, with Sarah translating. "I'd like to continue these explorations, perhaps with different instruments. Would your program be open to regular sessions?" Davidson nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. In fact, I have some colleagues at the Berklee College of Music who specialize in music perception for the deaf community. They've developed some fascinating technologies that translate sound into tactile experiences. I'd be happy to connect you." After the symphony team departed, William sat at the piano bench, his fingers resting lightly on the keys without pressing them. Sarah watched him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What are you thinking?" she signed. William's hands moved slowly, thoughtfully. "All these years I've been living in a world that I only partially understood. Music isn't just sound. It's physics. It's movement. It's something that can be felt in different ways throughout the body. Why didn't anyone ever show me this before?" Sarah's reply was gentle but direct. "Maybe because you never showed interest before. You've always been so focused on proving that your deafness wasn't a limitation that perhaps you closed yourself off to experiences you assumed weren't for you." William absorbed this, recognizing the truth in her words. His entire life had been constructed around the principle that his deafness was merely a characteristic, not a disability. He had refused special accommodations, insisted on communicating on the hearing world's terms as much as possible, and built his empire with a determination fueled partly by a desire to prove his capabilities. But in doing so, had he denied himself access to entire dimensions of human experience? The thought was both troubling and exhilarating. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Melody Carter, who stopped short at the sight of William sitting at the piano. School must have just let out. She was wearing a backpack and looked surprised to see him there so early in the afternoon. "Mr. Hayes," she said, careful to face him directly, "I didn't expect you today." William smiled and reached for his notepad, writing quickly, "The piano has been tuned for you, and I had a special lesson this morning from the symphony." Melody's eyes widened as she read the note. "The Charleston Symphony was here? In the hotel?" William nodded, gesturing for her to join him at the piano bench. Hesitantly, she set down her backpack and sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. "Would you play something?" he wrote. "I want to see if I can feel the difference with the tuned piano." Melody positioned her hands over the keys and began to play. The difference was immediately apparent to William. The vibrations felt cleaner somehow, more precise in their patterns. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the sensations traveling through the bench and into his body. When she finished, he opened his eyes to find her watching him curiously. "Can you really feel the difference?" she asked. William nodded and wrote, "It's clearer now. Before there was a muddiness to the vibrations, like ripples in water overlapping incorrectly." Melody smiled at the description. "That's actually a really good way to explain dissonance." They spent the next hour exploring the piano together. William asked questions through his notepad, and Melody demonstrated concepts through playing. She showed him how different musical styles created distinctive vibration patterns, the structured mathematical progressions of classical pieces, compared to the syncopated rhythms of jazz or the driving beat of rock. William was particularly fascinated by how chords created complex vibrations that he could feel differently depending on where he placed his hands on the piano. He realized that for 60 years he had been missing a language that could have been speaking to him through touch rather than sound. As the afternoon progressed, hotel guests began to filter into the lobby for the evening check-in rush. Some paused to watch the unusual sight of the teenage girl and the distinguished older man at the piano, clearly engaged in some form of musical education despite the obvious communication barrier. Sarah, who had been working nearby, approached and signed to William. "Your 4 o'clock conference call is in 15 minutes. William nodded reluctantly and wrote a note to Melody. "I have to go, but I've learned so much today. Thank you." Melody read the note and smiled. "It's weird, but explaining music this way is making me think about it differently too. I've always just played by instinct, but talking about vibrations and physics makes me understand the structure better." As William gathered his things, Melody hesitated, then asked, "Will you be back tomorrow?" The question caught him off guard. In his world of corporate acquisitions and high-stakes business, people rarely sought his company for personal reasons. He was respected, feared sometimes, but seldom simply wanted for conversation or companionship. He wrote his response carefully. "Yes, and I'd like to bring something to show you. A technology the symphony director told me about that translates music into visual patterns. Would that interest you?" Melody's face lit up. Definitely. As William left the hotel, he found himself looking forward to the next day with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. The business empire that had been his singular focus for decades suddenly seemed less all-consuming. A new world was opening to him, not just of music, but of connection and discovery. That evening, in his penthouse overlooking Charleston Harbor, William did something unprecedented. He ordered a subwoofer system for his living room, a powerful speaker designed to emphasize bass frequencies that create the strongest vibrations. When the bemused delivery person set it up, William played a classical music station through the system and sat on the floor with his back against the speaker, feeling the vibrations flow through his body. For the first time in his adult life, William Hayes was exploring the world not through the lens of business opportunity or strategic advantage, but through pure curiosity. The sensation was as novel and exhilarating as the vibrations themselves. The following weeks established a routine. William would arrive at the Charleston Grand in the late afternoon, timing his visits to coincide with Melody's after-school piano sessions. Hotel staff had grown accustomed to seeing the CEO sitting barefoot beside the grand piano, sometimes with elaborate vibration-sensing equipment provided by his new contacts at Berklee College of Music, other times with nothing more than his hands placed strategically on the wooden body of the instrument. Sarah noticed changes in William that went beyond his newfound musical interest. The perpetually busy executive was delegating more tasks, rescheduling meetings he would have once considered immovable, and most surprisingly, smiling more often. His communications with board members had taken on a different tone, less focused on quarterly projections, more interested in the guest experience at his properties. On a rainy Tuesday in April, William arrived at the hotel to find the piano alcove empty. He checked his watch, confirming that it was Melody's usual time. Sarah, always attuned to his concerns, approached the front desk to inquire and returned with a slight frown. The housekeeping supervisor says Lisa Carter called. "In sick today," she signed. "Melody isn't here because she's at home with her mother." William nodded, masking his disappointment. He had been eager to show Melody a new vibro-tactile system that translated different musical notes into specific vibration patterns, allowing deaf individuals to feel a melody's progression with remarkable precision. "Is it serious?" he signed to Sarah. "I don't know," she replied, but the supervisor mentioned it's not the first time recently. Apparently Lisa has missed several shifts in the past month. William frowned. Multiple missed shifts was concerning, especially for someone in Lisa's position. From his brief interactions with her, he'd gathered she was a dedicated worker who took pride in her reliability. Something didn't fit. "Find out more," he instructed Sarah, discreetly. 2 days later, Melody returned to the hotel, but William immediately noticed something different. The usually exuberant teenager played with technical precision, but none of her usual emotional expression. The vibrations felt correct, but somehow empty, lacking the warmth that had first captivated him. After she finished a particularly mechanically rendered piece, William wrote on his notepad, "Is everything all right?" "You seem troubled today." Melody read the note, her composure briefly cracking before she rebuilt her facade. "Everything's fine, just tired." William studied her face, recognizing the signs of a lie told out of necessity rather than malice. He wrote again, "Is your mother feeling better?" The question caught her off guard. "How did you know she was sick?" "I missed your playing when you weren't here. I asked about you." Melody's shoulders slumped slightly, the pretense of normalcy too exhausting to maintain. "She says she's fine, but..." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable discussing personal matters with her mother's employer. William wrote gently, "You can trust me, Melody. I'd like to help if I can." The girl bit her lip, conflict evident in her expression. Finally she spoke, her words coming in a rush. "Mom's been having these headaches and dizzy spells. She went to the free clinic, but they said she needs to see a specialist for tests. We don't have that kind of insurance, and even with her employee discount here, we can't afford it." She took a shaky breath. "I'm trying to pick up some babysitting, jobs on weekends to help, but it's not enough." William kept his expression neutral despite the surge of concern. Through Sarah's discreet inquiries, he had already learned that Lisa Carter was a widow raising Melody alone, living in a modest apartment in North Charleston, struggling to make ends meet on her housekeeper's salary, despite being one of the hotel's most valued staff members. He wrote carefully, "What kind of specialist?" "A neurologist." Melody's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're worried it might be something serious." William nodded, his mind already calculating. He wrote again, "Thank you for telling me. Now shall we try that new vibration system I mentioned?" The abrupt change of subject seemed to relieve Melody, giving her permission to set aside her worries, temporarily. For the next hour they explored the new technology, with William noting how quickly she grasped the correlation between specific vibration patterns and musical notes. That evening, William called an emergency meeting with the directors of the Hayes Foundation, the philanthropic organization he had established 10 years earlier, primarily as a tax strategy, but which had grown into a respectable charitable enterprise. "I want to establish a new healthcare initiative," he signed. To the board members gathered in his penthouse office, with Sarah translating. "A program specifically for hotel employees without adequate insurance coverage who need specialized medical care." The foundation director, Eleanor Winters, raised an eyebrow. "That's quite specific, William. May I ask what prompted this sudden interest?" William's expression remained impassive. "It's come to my attention that we have gaps in our employee care programs. I find that unacceptable." "This isn't about a specific employee, is it?" Eleanor pressed, always the pragmatist. "Because targeting foundation funds toward individuals rather than programs can create ethical complications." "It's about a systemic issue," William replied smoothly. "Create the program, make it available to all qualifying employees across all properties, and ensure the application process is straightforward and confidential." Within a week, the Hayes Employee Health Assistance Program was announced company-wide. The program would cover specialized medical care not included in the company's standard insurance policy, with priority given to long-term employees like Lisa Carter. William was careful to maintain his distance. He didn't want Lisa to feel singled out or obligated. The foundation would handle all applications independently, and his personal involvement would remain hidden. Nevertheless, he watched carefully from a distance, having instructed Sarah to keep him informed about Lisa's situation without revealing his interest to others. When Sarah reported that Lisa had submitted an application to the program and been approved for full coverage of her neurological consultations and tests, William allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. 2 weeks later, Melody arrived at the hotel with a noticeable spring in her step. She approached the piano with renewed energy, and the piece she played sent vibrations through the floor that William could feel from across the lobby, joyful, exuberant patterns that drew the attention of several guests. When she finished, William approached with his notepad. "That was beautiful. Something good has happened." Melody beamed. "The doctors finally figured out what's wrong with Mom. It's not..." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It's not what they feared. It's a treatable condition called vestibular migraines. She started medication yesterday, and she's already feeling better." She looked at William with eyes bright with relief. "And the best part is that new employee health program is covering everything. We couldn't believe it when the approval came through. Talk about perfect timing." William nodded, keeping his expression one of polite interest rather than personal investment. "That's fortunate. Your playing today reflected your happiness." "I didn't even realize music could do that," Melody said. "Show how you're feeling without you meaning to." "It's one of the things I'm learning," William wrote. "Emotion translates into vibration patterns too. When you're troubled, the vibrations feel different, technically correct but lacking something essential." Melody considered this. "That's exactly how I felt playing last week. Like I was just going through the motions." She looked at him curiously. "How can you understand music so well when you've never heard it?" William smiled and wrote, "Perhaps because I'm experiencing it differently than most people. I have no preconceptions about what music should be, only what it feels like to me." As they continued their session, William noticed Lisa Carter watching them from the staff doorway. She was still in her housekeeping uniform, but there was a new alertness to her posture. The exhaustion that had marked her features recently, now noticeably diminished. Their eyes met briefly across the lobby, and she gave him a small, knowing nod before disappearing back through the door. She suspects, William realized, but she wouldn't say anything. Pride would prevent her from acknowledging a charity she hadn't sought, even if she had benefited from it. He respected that pride. It was something he recognized in himself. Later that evening, as William reviewed the day's correspondence in his office, Sarah placed a small envelope on his desk. "From Lisa Carter," she signed. "Delivered to the front desk this afternoon." William opened it to find a simple thank you card with a handwritten note. "Some kindnesses can't be acknowledged openly, but should never go unrecognized. With deepest gratitude, Lisa Carter." He tucked the card into his desk drawer, oddly moved by the simple acknowledgement. For a man who had built hospitals with his name prominently displayed on the buildings, this small private expression of gratitude felt more significant than any public recognition. That night, William found himself standing on his penthouse balcony, feeling the vibrations of the city below, the subtle tremor of traffic, the distant rhythm of music from the waterfront restaurants, the pulse of a world in constant motion. He had spent decades insulating himself from these sensations, viewing his deafness as something to overcome rather than a different way of experiencing the world. Now, thanks to a teenage girl and her piano, he was beginning to understand just how much he had missed. On a bright June morning, William was reviewing architectural plans for a new Hayes property in San Francisco when Sarah entered his office with an unusual expression, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty that immediately caught his attention. "What is it?" he signed, setting aside the blueprints. Sarah placed a letter on his desk. "This came for Melody Carter at the hotel. The manager wasn't sure what to do with it, so he sent it to me." William raised an eyebrow, questioning the relevance. "It's from the Thornton Conservatory of Music," Sarah explained, her signs emphatic. "One of the most prestigious music schools in the country. They're offering her an audition." William picked up the letter, scanning its contents. The Thornton Conservatory, based in Boston, was indeed inviting Melody to audition for their Young Artists program, a selective summer intensive that often led to full scholarships for talented musicians from diverse backgrounds. "How did they even know about her?" he signed, genuinely puzzled. Sarah's expression turned slightly guilty. "I may have sent them some videos of her playing." William stared at his assistant, surprised by this unexpected initiative. "You spend hours with her at that piano," Sarah defended herself. "Anyone can see she has remarkable talent. I thought she deserved an opportunity." William couldn't argue with that assessment. Over the past months, he had witnessed Melody's extraordinary gift firsthand. Her technical skill was impressive, but it was her intuitive understanding of music's emotional landscape, something she could convey even to someone who had never heard a note, that truly set her apart. "The audition is next month in Boston," Sarah continued. "But there's a problem." William nodded, already understanding. A trip to Boston would be expensive: airfare, hotel, meals. For Lisa Carter, supporting her daughter's talent was already a financial stretch. An audition at an elite conservatory would be far beyond their means. "Give the letter to Lisa directly," he signed. "I don't want to overstep." The next afternoon, William arrived at the Charleston Grand to find Melody already at the piano, but not playing. She sat on the bench, staring at the keys, the conservatory letter open beside her. Her expression was a complex mixture of pride, excitement, and resignation. He approached quietly, sitting beside her when she noticed his presence. No notepad was necessary. Her distress was evident. "My mom got the letter," she said, her voice flat despite her effort to seem unconcerned. "It's a really big honor just to be invited to audition." William nodded encouragingly. "But we can't afford it," Melody continued, finally looking up at him. "The trip to Boston, the hotel, Mom calculated everything. And even if she picked up extra shifts, it's just not possible right now, especially after her medical bills." William reached for his ever-present notepad and wrote, "What if you had the financial support? Would you want to go?" Melody's eyes widened. "Of course. Thornton is..." It's where pianists like me dream of studying. But I couldn't ask anyone for that kind of help. William wrote again. Not even the Hayes Foundation? We have a scholarship program for exceptional young artists. You do? Melody looked skeptical. I've never heard of it. William smiled slightly and wrote, That's because I'm establishing it right now. The skepticism on Melody's face deepened. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate the thought, but I don't want charity. My mom always says we have to make our own way. William considered this, understanding the pride behind the sentiment. He wrote carefully, Not charity, investment. Talent like yours deserves cultivation. The foundation would sponsor your audition. Expenses. If you're accepted to the program, we would cover those costs as well. In return, you would give occasional performances at Hayes Properties for special events. Melody read his words slowly, clearly torn between opportunity and pride. I'd have to talk to my mom about it. William nodded and wrote, Of course, the offer stands regardless. The following week brought another development that William hadn't anticipated. His board of directors, puzzled by his continued presence at the Charleston Grand and his new interest in music education, had called a special meeting to discuss the CEO's concerning shift in priorities. The quarterly projections for the Pacific Rim properties are below targets, Bernard Keller, the chief financial officer, explained during the meeting. The Singapore expansion is behind schedule, and you've cancelled 3 site visits in the past month. Meanwhile, you're spending afternoons sitting in the lobby of our least profitable hotel. William's expression remained impassive as Sarah translated. The Singapore delays are due to regulatory issues beyond our control, he signed in response. As for my time at the Charleston Grand, I'm developing a new guest experience initiative involving a teenage pianist, Bernard pressed, clearly skeptical. William's eyes narrowed slightly. Involving vibration-enhanced musical performances that can be enjoyed by both hearing and deaf guests. It's part of a broader accessibility program I'm considering. The board members exchanged glances, not entirely convinced but unwilling to challenge William directly. He had built Hayes Hospitality International from the ground up, turning a single inherited hotel into a global luxury brand through relentless focus and innovation. If he now chose to explore accessibility initiatives, they would give him leeway for now. After the meeting, Sarah approached him with concern evident in her expression. They're not happy, she signed. They don't need to be happy, William replied. They need to trust that I know what I'm doing. And do you? Sarah's signs were gentle but probing. William paused, considering. I'm not sure, he admitted, but I know it's important. Later that week, Lisa Carter requested a meeting with William, a first in their months of peripheral interaction. She arrived at his office precisely on time, dressed in a simple but carefully pressed blouse and skirt, rather than her housekeeping uniform. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hayes, she began, maintaining eye contact so he could read her lips. Sarah sat nearby, ready to translate if needed, but Lisa was making a visible effort to communicate directly. Melody told me about your foundation's offer, she continued. It's incredibly generous. William nodded, waiting for her to continue. Before I agree to anything, I need to understand why. Lisa's directness was refreshing in a world where people often danced around topics with him. Why Melody? Why this interest in her music? William considered his response carefully, then signed to Sarah, who translated, Your daughter helped me experience something I never thought possible. Music has always been abstract to me, something the hearing world enjoyed that I could only understand intellectually. Melody showed me how to feel music, how to experience it through vibration and visual cues. She opened a door I didn't know existed. Lisa absorbed this, her expression softening slightly. And this scholarship program? Is it real? Or was it created specifically for Melody? William smiled at her perception and signed, It's becoming real. Your daughter was the inspiration, but the program will help many talented young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. The foundation board approved it yesterday. Lisa nodded slowly. I don't want special treatment for my daughter, Mr. Hayes, but I don't want to deny her opportunities because of pride either. It's not special treatment to recognize exceptional talent, William replied through Sarah. Your daughter has a gift. The world should hear it, even if I cannot. That simple statement seemed to resolve something for Lisa. Then we accept your foundation's support, with gratitude and the understanding that Melody will fulfill any performance obligations required. As Lisa rose to leave, she hesitated, then added, Mr. Hayes, I hope you know how much your interest has meant to Melody. Before you she played because she loved it. Now she plays with purpose. That's a precious gift. After Lisa left, William sat in thoughtful silence. Sarah, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange, finally signed, You're going to have to tell the board about the new scholarship program. William nodded absently, his mind already working through the details. Draft a proposal. 5 million initial endowment, targeting musically gifted students from low-income backgrounds, with preference for those with interest in making music accessible to deaf and hard-of-hearing communities. Sarah's eyebrows rose at the figure. 5 million. The board will have questions. Let them question, William signed dismissively. Music education budgets are being cut nationwide. We're addressing a gap. 2 weeks later, Melody departed for Boston, accompanied by her mother, for her audition at the Thornton Conservatory. William had arranged everything through the foundation. First-class airfare, accommodation at the Hayes Boston Harbor, a private practice room with a Steinway grand piano for preparation. The Hayes Foundation Young Artist Scholarship had been officially announced, with considerable media attention given William's prominence in the business world and his unexpected entry into arts philanthropy. The board had ultimately approved the program, though not without significant debate and a smaller initial endowment than William had proposed. In Melody's absence, William found himself at loose ends. He attended the necessary meetings, reviewed the required reports, but his attention kept drifting to the empty piano bench in the Charleston Grand's lobby. The hotel seemed eerily silent, without the vibrations he had grown accustomed to feeling through the marble floors. When Sarah entered his office on Friday afternoon with a message that Melody had called from Boston, William set aside the contract he'd been reviewing with uncharacteristic haste. She got in, Sarah signed, her face breaking into a wide smile. Full scholarship to the summer program, with strong indication of a place in their pre-college program this fall if she continues to impress. William felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest, a swelling of pride entirely unrelated to business achievement or personal accomplishment. It was pride in someone else's success, in potential recognized and nurtured. There's more, Sarah continued. The conservatory's director was so impressed by the vibro-tactile systems you've been experimenting with that he wants to discuss implementing similar technology in their facilities. He's particularly interested in your experience as a deaf person, engaging with music through alternative sensory channels. William leaned back in his chair, momentarily overwhelmed. What had begun as a chance encounter with a teenage pianist had somehow expanded into something much larger. Not just a personal awakening, but potentially a new way of thinking about music accessibility on an institutional scale. For the first time in decades, William Hayes was venturing beyond the comfortable boundaries of his hotel empire into uncharted territory. The vibrations he had first felt beneath his bare feet in the Charleston Grand lobby had set something in motion that was still reverberating, still expanding outward in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend. And strangely, he was perfectly content with that uncertainty. William spent the humid Charleston summer immersed in 2 parallel projects. By day, he oversaw the development of Hayes Hospitality's newest venture, a complete renovation of the Charleston Grand's ballroom into a state-of-the-art performance space with innovative vibro-tactile flooring that would allow deaf guests to experience music through touch. By evening, he pored over old storage boxes that Sarah had unearthed from his estate's attic at his request. The boxes contained memories he had long ago packed away, photographs, letters, and most significantly, videos of his late wife, Eleanor. Their marriage had lasted 15 years before cancer had claimed her 2 decades ago. In the aftermath of her passing, William had channeled his grief into expanding his hotel empire, using work as both distraction and monument to their shared dreams. Now watching digitized versions of these old home videos, William made a discovery that shook him to his core. Eleanor, it seemed, had been an accomplished violinist before they met. The videos showed her playing at small venues, her expression one of complete absorption in the music. In one particularly poignant clip, she explained to the camera, clearly for William's benefit, why she loved the violin. "It's the instrument closest to the human voice," she said, looking directly into the lens as if speaking across time to him. "You don't just play it, you become part of it. The vibrations travel from the strings through the wood into your collarbone, your chest. You feel the music inside you as you create it." William paused the video, struck by her words. Eleanor had understood even then that music was not just sound, it was vibration, it was physical connection. Had she tried to share this with him? Had he been too focused on proving his independence, on showing the world that his deafness was not a limitation to receive the gift she had been offering? More revelations followed as he continued through the videos. Eleanor performing less and less frequently after their marriage, her violin case gradually gathering dust in the background of their home videos. Eventually it disappeared entirely. William could pinpoint exactly when. It coincided with the expansion of Hayes Hospitality from a regional chain to a national brand. She had given up her music to support his ambitions. The realization left him shaken. He had never asked her to make that sacrifice. But had he created an environment where she felt it was necessary? Had his single-minded focus on business success left no room for her artistic pursuits? Sarah found him late one evening in his home office, surrounded by old photographs and video stills. "I never knew she was a musician," William signed, his movements heavy with regret. "All those years together, and I never truly understood what music meant to her." Sarah sat beside him, looking through the photographs. "She loved you, William. That much is clear in every image." "But I missed a fundamental part of who she was," he replied. "I was so determined to succeed in the hearing world on my terms that I never considered there might be experiences worth embracing that were different from what I understood." The irony wasn't lost on him. It had taken a teenage girl playing a piano in a hotel lobby to open his eyes to what his wife might have been trying to show him decades earlier. The discovery fueled William's determination to complete the Charleston Grand's transformation. The original renovation plans expanded to include not just the ballroom but the entire hotel, reimagining it as a destination that celebrated music and artistic expression while pioneering new ways for deaf individuals to experience both. When Melody returned from her summer program at the Thornton Conservatory in August, she found the Charleston Grand in the midst of dramatic changes. The lobby where she had once played to an audience of one now featured a custom-designed concert piano on a platform of specially engineered resonant wood that amplified vibrations throughout the space. "Mr. Hayes," she exclaimed upon seeing him for the first time in months. "What happened to the hotel?" William smiled and handed her a note. "It's evolving. How was Boston?" Melody's face lit up. "Amazing, challenging, terrifying, the best experience of my life." She gestured to the construction around them. "But what is all this?" "The beginning of something new," William wrote. "A space where music can be experienced by everyone, regardless of how they hear." Over lunch in the hotel's restaurant, Melody shared stories from her summer at the conservatory, the intensive classes, the brilliant instructors, the fellow students who had become friends and rivals. William noticed the change in her immediately. She carried herself with new confidence, speaking with the assured passion of someone who had found her calling. "The conservatory director asked me about you," she said between bites of her sandwich. "He was fascinated by how you experience music through vibration. He said it's making him rethink their entire approach to inclusive music education." William nodded, pleased that the conversations he'd initiated were continuing. "They offered me a place in their pre-college program this fall," Melody continued, her expression growing serious, "with a full scholarship." William wrote, "That's Wonderful news. Will you accept? Melody's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Mom and I are still discussing it. It would mean moving to Boston, leaving her here alone. She looked down at her plate. She says I should go, that it's the opportunity of a lifetime, but I worry about her. William considered this, understanding the dilemma. He wrote carefully, "What would make the decision easier?" "If Mom could come with me," Melody replied without hesitation. "But she can't just leave her job, her security. We've never lived anywhere but Charleston." William nodded thoughtfully. The solution seemed obvious to him, but he needed to approach it delicately, respecting the pride and independence that both Melody and Lisa valued so highly. Later that afternoon, he arranged a meeting with Lisa Carter in his office. Unlike their previous meeting, this time she seemed more at ease, proud as she described Melody's success at the conservatory. "The instructors say she has potential for a real career in music," Lisa said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "They've offered her a place in their pre-college program with full financial support." William nodded and signed, with Sarah translating, "But you're concerned about relocating to Boston." Lisa sighed. "It's not just the practical challenges, though those are considerable. She hesitated. "It's that I've always been the one to provide for Melody, to make sure she had what she needed. This feels like I'm letting others take over that role." William understood this sentiment all too well, the fierce independence that could sometimes become its own limitation. He had lived most of his life that way. "I have a proposition," he signed. "Hayes Hospitality is expanding our Boston presence. We're in need of an experienced hospitality professional to train staff in our standards and procedures." He paused, letting Sarah translate before continuing. "It would be a promotion from your current position, with relocation assistance and housing provided near the conservatory." Lisa's expression shifted from surprise to suspicion. "Are you creating a position for me, Mr. Hayes?" William shook his head. "The position exists. You're qualified. The timing is fortuitous for everyone involved." Lisa studied him for a long moment. "Why are you doing all this? First the medical program, then Melody's scholarship, now a job offer. Why us?" William considered how to express what had been gradually becoming clear to him over the past months. With Sarah translating, he signed, "I built an empire focused on providing luxury experiences, yet I myself was missing fundamental human experiences because I assumed they weren't accessible to me. Your daughter showed me I was wrong. That isn't charity. It's a debt I can never fully repay." He continued, his signs becoming more emphatic. "I had a wife who loved music, who might have tried to share it with me in ways I couldn't accept then. I lost that chance. I won't be responsible for another musician having to choose between their art and practical necessity." The raw honesty of his response seemed to affect Lisa deeply. After a long moment, she nodded. "I'll consider your offer, Mr. Hayes, and thank you, not just for the opportunity, but for seeing my daughter's gift when others might have missed it." As September approached, William accelerated the renovations at the Charleston Grand. The project had evolved far beyond its original scope, now encompassing a complete reimagining of the space as the Hayes Center for Accessible Arts, a hotel that doubled as a performance venue designed specifically to make music and art accessible to deaf and hard-of-hearing individuals. The centerpiece would be the Grand Ballroom, transformed into a concert hall with a specialized floor that transmitted vibrations throughout the space, allowing deaf audience members to experience music through touch. Visual elements would translate musical notes into light patterns, creating a multi-sensory experience unlike anything currently available. When William presented the expanded plans to his board, the resistance was immediate and vocal. "This is mission drift, William," Bernard Keller argued during a particularly heated meeting. "We're a luxury hotel chain, not a performing arts center. The projected returns on this investment are speculative at best." William remained unmoved. "Hayes Hospitality has always led through innovation," he signed, with Sarah translating. "This is the next evolution, creating spaces that are not just luxurious but truly accessible to all guests, offering experiences that can't be found elsewhere." "And this has nothing to do with your personal journey over the past months?" Bernard pressed. Nothing to do with a talented young pianist who happened to be in the right place at the right time? William's expression hardened slightly. My personal experiences have informed my vision for the company, as they always have. I've come to understand that true luxury isn't just about thread counts and rare wines. It's about creating meaningful experiences that guests couldn't access otherwise. The debate continued for hours, but William eventually prevailed, as he usually did. The board approved the expanded renovation with the stipulation that the concept would need to prove its viability before being implemented at other properties. As the meeting adjourned, Bernard lingered behind, approaching William directly. "I've known you for 30 years, he said, making sure William could read his lips clearly. "I've never seen you like this, passionate about something beyond the bottom line." William raised an eyebrow, unsure if this was criticism or observation. "It suits you," Bernard added, surprising him. "I just hope you know what you're doing." William nodded, appreciating the candor. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure where this new path would lead, but for the first time in decades, the uncertainty felt exhilarating rather than threatening. That evening, alone in his penthouse, William opened the case containing Eleanor's violin, a beautiful instrument he had found in storage along with the videos. He ran his fingers along the smooth wood, feeling the subtle texture of the grain. Placing it against his shoulder, as he had seen her do in the videos, he drew the bow across the strings, feeling the vibrations travel through the wood and into his body. He couldn't hear the note he produced, but he could feel it, a direct connection to Eleanor across time, a sensation that brought tears to his eyes for the first time since her funeral. In that moment, William Hayes understood that he wasn't just building a new hotel concept or launching a philanthropic initiative. He was, at 60 years old, finally allowing himself to experience the fullness of a world he had previously defined by its limitations rather than its possibilities. The grand reopening of the Charleston Grand, now officially renamed the E. Hayes Center for Accessible Arts, was scheduled for a warm evening in late October, coinciding with the city's annual Fall Arts Festival. The timing was strategic, ensuring that critics, artists, and potential guests from across the country would be in attendance to witness the unveiling of what William hoped would be a revolutionary concept in both hospitality and artistic accessibility. Melody had returned from Boston for the weekend specifically for this event. Now enrolled in the Thornton Conservatory's pre-college program and thriving under the tutelage of renowned instructors, she had composed a special piece for the opening, a composition designed specifically to be experienced through the center's innovative vibrotactile systems. It would be the centerpiece of the evening's performances. Lisa, now settled into her new position as training director for Hayes Hospitality's New England properties, had flown in with her daughter. The months in Boston had been transformative for both of them. Lisa's confidence had grown with her new responsibilities, while Melody was blossoming in an environment that nurtured her talent without the financial strain that had previously limited her. Opportunities. William spent the morning of the opening making final inspections of the property. The renovations had transformed the boutique hotel entirely. The lobby, once a traditional space with generic luxury touches, now featured architectural elements designed to enhance acoustics and amplify vibrations. The grand piano remained, but now it sat on a special platform connected to a system that transmitted its vibrations throughout the floor. The ballroom had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Now a concert hall with tiered seating, it featured a stage with embedded vibrotactile technology and seating areas designed to optimize vibration transmission. The walls incorporated visual elements that translated sound into light patterns, creating a multi-sensory experience of music. For guests who could hear, the acoustics were impeccable. For those who couldn't, the experience would be equally rich through different sensory channels. Sarah found William in the concert hall, running his hand along one of the specially designed chairs that would transmit vibrations from the performers to the audience. "Nervous?" she signed with a knowing smile. William shook his head, then reconsidered and nodded slightly. "Not about the center," he signed back, "about tonight's performance." His admission surprised Sarah. William Hayes had never been one to admit nervousness about anything. He had faced down billion-dollar negotiations and hostile takeover attempts without a hint of uncertainty. "Tonight isn't just about the building or the technology," he continued. "It's about whether we've truly created something that bridges worlds, that allows people with different sensory experiences to share art together." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of this personal mission. "The guest list is impressive," she signed. "Critics from major publications, representatives from deaf advocacy organizations, potential investors, arts patrons from across the country." "And the local community?" William asked, having insisted that tickets be made available to Charleston residents at accessible prices, with a block specifically reserved for members of the deaf community. "Fully booked," Sarah confirmed, "including 20 students from the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind." William nodded with satisfaction. This was perhaps the audience that mattered most to him, young people who might discover, as he had late in life, that music could be experienced in ways they hadn't imagined possible. As afternoon faded into evening, guests began to arrive. William greeted them in the lobby, where a string quartet played beside the grand piano, the vibrations of their instruments flowing through the specially designed floor. Deaf guests, forewarned about the unique features of the space, removed their shoes to better feel the music through their feet, many breaking into surprised smiles at the sensation. Melody found William as he finished speaking with a journalist from a prominent arts magazine. She had matured in the months since leaving Charleston, her posture more confident, her expressions more nuanced. She wore a simple black dress that spoke of her emerging sophistication. "The acoustics in the hall are amazing," she said, making sure he could see her lips clearly. "And the vibration system is even better than I expected. I can feel exactly how each note will translate." William smiled and wrote on his notepad, "Nervous about your premiere?" Melody took a deep breath. "Terrified," she admitted. "This piece means so much to me. I wrote it thinking about our first meeting, how you experienced music through vibration before you ever understood what music was supposed to be." William was touched by this revelation. He wrote, "I'm honored, and I'm certain it will be beautiful." As guests moved into the concert hall for the evening's performances, a palpable excitement filled the space. The program would begin with classical pieces, performed by the Charleston Symphony, followed by contemporary works, and culminating in the premiere of Melody's composition. William took his seat in the front row, removed his shoes, and placed his feet firmly on the floor. Beside him sat Sarah, and on his other side, unexpectedly, Bernard Keller, the board member who had been most skeptical of the entire project. "I had to see this for myself," Bernard said, leaning close so William could read his lips. "I still think you're crazy, but I admire the vision." William nodded in acknowledgement of both the criticism and the compliment. The lights dimmed and the symphony began to play. William closed his eyes, focusing entirely on the vibrations flowing through the floor and into his body. The technology worked beautifully. He could distinguish between different instruments, feel the structure of the music, experience the emotional swells and fades through the changing intensity of vibrations. When he opened his eyes, he noticed several deaf audience members with expressions of wonder and emotion on their faces, experiencing orchestral music, perhaps for the first time in a way that made it accessible and meaningful to them. One elderly woman was openly weeping, her hands pressed to the armrests of her chair to better feel the vibrations. The evening progressed through a diverse program designed to showcase the center's capabilities. Throughout it all, William found himself more emotionally affected than he had anticipated. This wasn't just a business venture or a philanthropic project. It was the culmination of a personal journey that had begun with a chance encounter and bare feet on a marble floor. Finally, it was time for Melody's premiere. She walked onto the stage with calm determination, acknowledging the applause with a graceful nod before taking her place at the grand piano. The piece was titled Silent Resonance, a name that had made William smile when he first saw it on the program. As Melody began to play, something unexpected happened. The vibration amplification system that had been working flawlessly throughout the evening suddenly failed. A technical glitch perhaps, or an electrical surge. The cause wasn't immediately apparent, but the result was that the carefully engineered vibrations that should have been flowing through the floor suddenly stopped. Murmur of concern rippled through the audience. William could see technicians rushing to the control panel at the back of the hall. Melody paused, looking up in confusion at the commotion. For a moment, it seemed the grand unveiling might end in technical disaster. Then, William watched as Melody made a decision. She stood from the piano bench, moved to the edge of the stage, and did something entirely unexpected. She sat down on the floor of the stage, legs crossed, and motioned for the front row of the audience to join her on the floor. Hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, audience members, hearing and deaf alike, moved from their seats to sit on the floor. William found himself joining them, along with Sarah and remarkably Bernard Keller. Soon the entire front section of the audience was seated on the wooden floor of the hall. Melody smiled, then returned to the piano, which had been positioned near the edge of the stage. As she began to play again, her fingers striking the keys. With deliberate force, the vibrations traveled directly through the wooden stage and floor, unmediated by technology. They were fainter than the amplified system had provided, but somehow more authentic, more immediate. William closed his eyes, focusing intently on the subtle vibrations moving through the floor and into his body. The piece began with a simple, repetitive pattern that he could easily follow, like a heartbeat or a pulse. Gradually, it evolved into something more complex, layers of vibration building upon each other, creating patterns that seemed to tell a story without words. He recognized with a surge of emotion that Melody had composed a piece that perfectly translated into the language of vibration. Even without the amplification system, it was clear, comprehensible, and deeply moving. She had created music that could be genuinely experienced by both hearing and deaf audience members, not as an accommodation or adaptation, but as a work, conceived for multiple modes of perception. Looking around, William saw that the deaf audience members were as engaged as anyone else, some with their hands pressed to the floor, others with eyes closed in concentration, all clearly connected to the performance. There was no division between those who could hear and those who couldn't, only shared experience, different but equal. As the piece reached its climax, William felt something break open inside him, a wall he hadn't even realized he'd built. Tears began to stream down his face, surprising him with their suddenness and intensity. They were tears for Eleanor and the connection to music they might have shared. Tears for the decades he'd spent believing certain experiences weren't meant for him. Tears of gratitude for the young pianist who had shown him otherwise. Bernard Keller, seeing William's emotion, placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, gesture of understanding and perhaps apology for his earlier skepticism. Sarah, who had seen William through countless business triumphs without ever seeing him cry, discreetly handed him a handkerchief. When Melody finished playing, there was a moment of profound silence or stillness from William's perspective. Then the audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. The deaf audience members joined in their own way, some applauding, others using the visual applause of deaf culture, hands raised and shaking in the air. William remained seated, on the floor, overwhelmed by the moment. Melody sought him out in the audience, their eyes meeting across the distance. She gave him a small private smile that acknowledged what they both knew, that sometimes the most profound connections happen when technology fails and humanity adapts. Later, at the reception following the performances, critics and patrons surrounded Melody, praising both her composition and her quick thinking during the technical failure. The incident, rather than detracting from the evening, had somehow become its most powerful moment, a demonstration that accessibility wasn't just about technology, but about reimagining how we share experiences. Lisa approached William, watching her daughter from a distance as she navigated her new role as a composer of note. "When John died," she said, referring to her late husband, "I thought our world had contracted permanently. I was focused on survival, on providing the basics. Music was Melody's escape, but I never imagined it could open doors like this." She turned to face William directly. "Thank you for seeing possibilities I couldn't see." William nodded, understanding completely. He wrote on his notepad, "She helped me see possibilities too." As the evening wound down, William found himself on the rooftop terrace of the hotel, looking out over the Charleston skyline. The city's historic steeples and modern buildings created a silhouette against the night sky, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. He felt the subtle vibrations of the city, distant traffic, music from neighboring buildings, the ever-present pulse of human activity. Sarah joined him, leaning against the railing beside him. "Success?" she signed simply. William considered. The question. By conventional metrics, press coverage, audience response, bookings for future events, the answer was clearly yes. The Hayes Center concept was already generating inquiries about expansion to other locations, but that wasn't what Sarah was really asking. "Yes," he signed back, "but not for the reasons I expected." Meaning? "I thought this project was about creating access to music for people like me," William explained, his signs thoughtful and measured. But it became something more, a recognition that we all experience the world differently, and those differences can enrich rather than divide us. Sarah smiled. "That sounds suspiciously like wisdom, William." He chuckled silently. "At 60, it's about time." In the months that followed, the Hayes Center for Accessible Arts became a model for inclusive design in both hospitality and performing art spaces. William expanded the concept to select properties in his portfolio, always maintaining the core philosophy that luxury meant access to meaningful experiences, not just material comforts. Melody continued her studies at the Thornton Conservatory, returning to Charleston periodically to premiere new works at the Hayes Center. Her composition Silent Resonance was published and began to be performed by pianists around the country, often in venues that adopted vibro-tactile technology inspired by the Hayes Center. For William, the most profound change was internal. He began reconnecting with family members he had drifted away from over the years, nephews and nieces he had kept at a distance, cousins whose invitations he had declined, choosing work instead of connection. He learned to express affection more openly, to recognize that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but another form of strength. On Melody's 16th birthday, William presented her with a special gift, a custom-designed piano with enhanced vibration, features that would allow her to better understand how her compositions would be experienced by deaf audience members. Attached was a simple card that read, "To the teacher who showed me that music isn't just sound, it's connection, resilience, and the courage to feel deeply, however that feeling reaches us." The girl who had once played a neglected piano in an empty hotel lobby was now composing works that bridged sensory worlds, inspired by a man who had spent 6 decades believing music wasn't meant for him. And the businessman who had built an empire on providing luxury to others had finally discovered the luxury of genuine human connection, a lesson that had been waiting for him all along, vibrating just beneath the surface of his carefully constructed life. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by William and Melody's journey of discovery and connection. To continue experiencing stories that touch the heart and expand our understanding of human connection, we've prepared a special playlist of equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the unexpected ways we find meaning and connection. We look forward to reading your thoughts. In the comments section below,